Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining our webinar on Beyond the Checkbox, making engagement more effective and impactful. I'm super excited to introduce our speakers for today. I'm Sarah, Director of North America at Go Vocal. I'll be our host today and helping out in the chat. And we have Milsey Carrasco from City of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Janine Santoro from City of Bethlehem, and Chloe Moore from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And Laura with us, who is our moderator for today. Laura, I would love if you could introduce yourself and the work you do at Local Policy Lab.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. My name's Laura Wood, and I'm Vice President for Democracy with the Local Policy Lab. We are a nonprofit organization that works with cities and local governments to help them better engage residents in their work to strengthen civic engagement and democracy, and also address the effects of climate change. And I have a background in state and local government myself in my home state of New York, but have gotten to know the folks in Lancaster very well over the past few years, and I'm really excited to get to know Janine and Chloe better through our conversation today, and have had the privilege of working with Sarah and the Go Vocal team. So delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. We're excited to have you and have your perspective on this panel today. All right, a couple quick housekeeping items before we officially kick off. Our structure for today, we're actually going to have 3 spotlights. So we'll spend some time first in Lancaster with Milsey, go to Janine in Bethlehem, and then finish up with Chloe over in Montgomery County. They have some interesting themes to talk about around institutionalizing engagement, how to break down silos internally, and how to use blended engagement strategies. So incorporating what you're doing offline and online to maximize engagement and inclusion. I encourage you all to utilize the chat openly. Please ask questions throughout. Myself, the Go Vocal team, and Laura's team will be chiming in there with answers. And of course, drop any questions. We will get to those in the Q&A. All right, before we get started, to help the panelists and Laura kind of frame the discussion today, we'd love to know a little bit about you and your work in community engagement. Borna from Go Vocal, would you mind launching the poll for us?
Sarah, give me a second. I think you'll have to launch it because you're the host. Sorry.
Okay, lovely. I could probably figure that out. There we go. Yeah. Let me relaunch it. All right, you should be seeing this poll now on the screen. We'd love to know which best represents your role. Are you a comms and engagement professional, planner, public safety, fire, other, academia, engagement superfan? We love those. Give it just a little bit more, about 30 more seconds. That timed perfectly with a siren driving by my window. So hopefully that didn't come through. All right, I'm going to share the results. It looks like we have most of you, 52%, comms and engagement professionals, and then a high amount of other academia, public sector staff, etc. Wonderful. All right, that should no longer be on your screen. I'm going to go ahead and move us forward to Lancaster. Over to you, Laura.
Great. Thank you so much. Milsey, it's been such a pleasure to get to know you and your team over the last few years, and I'm really excited to hear you share more with this group today about your work at the Department of Neighborhood Engagement. I guess my first question is why this might be obvious, but why do you think it was so critical to prioritize engagement? And what challenges, if any, did you face in convincing both your colleagues in city government as well as community members about the importance of this work?
Yeah, thank you. I think that those are questions that many folks in many municipalities and local government, it's a question that a lot of people ask us. And I just want to start off with thanking Go Vocal, thanking you, Laura, because it is a pleasure working with LPL and guiding us through this process and documenting the process with us. Sarah and the team at Go Vocal have been with us since 2021. And so you are part of the engagement family for the City of Lancaster. I will say prioritizing engagement was really important and essential for a lot of our residents and for city staff, specifically folks. So our population here in the City of Lancaster, it's about 42% Latino. And per capita, we are at times, throughout the last 10 years, the #1 city for immigrant and refugee resettlement. So a very diverse, small city. And when we talk about engaging residents and making sure that we're including, we're communicating accessibly to our community was one of the biggest priorities and the things that, as a new mayor, Mayor Sirachi coming into office in 2018, that she was listening and hearing from constituents. Also, the importance that we were hearing for community members in major decision making that was happening in the city that was directly impacting the quality of life of our residents. So she wanted to make sure that there was a process for residents to communicate that information and elevate it directly to her office. So she established in 2018, recognizing these issues and the disconnect and making sure that she was really being intentional, was creating an Office of Neighborhood Engagement within her office. I was basically hired and directly reporting to her, instantly signaling overnight the importance of residents' feedback into the decision-making process of our city.
Thanks so much for that, Milsey. And once you got this go ahead from Mayor Sirachi, could you share what strategies were the most effective in getting other city staff to buy into the Department of Neighborhood Engagement's work and get you the support you needed to make this a success?
Yeah, and so as a follow-up to your first question, because I think there was two in there and it ties into this next question too, I would say the opportunities, lots of challenges and a lot of opportunities. So coming in with a new office and really understanding the internal impact was something that I wish I would have focused on a little bit sooner, because when we were established as an office, it was really focusing externally and working with community members. But convincing the city leadership of the importance of engagement wasn't the challenge. I think, really, the mayor, the CEO of the city is signaling, saying like, I want these things to happen. So there was a lot of buy-in early on, having her champion these efforts. But I would say, and signaling to not only the city leadership, but, at the bureau chief level and communities, and partners that we're working, external partners that we're working. So there was a shared understanding. Everyone knew that it was good and necessary. The real challenge came where departments and staff are like, okay, this is great and it feels good, but I need to know what is engagement, how do I incorporate it into the day-to-day processes and into our planning, and what role did our office at the time play, and what was the role of project managers of different initiatives happening throughout the city. So again, the original focus was externally, but really understanding as we were building some of those external mechanisms, that internally there was a strong importance to make sure that we were engaging internally with staff and understanding what their engagement needs were.
Great.
Questions.
Sorry, what's that, Milsey?
I think I answered all of your questions there.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue into my next question, which is maybe you can provide some examples of how engagement has actually been woven into existing city processes. And I know, you're very focused on sustaining this work and making sure that it really becomes institutionalized beyond individual leaders or administration. So would love your thoughts and examples of that.
Sure. I would say the biggest, so in 2018, we had an office, the biggest moment in this work for the City of Lancaster happened in 2022, when council and community members voted to actually establish a full department. And so essentially, over 30 years, it would be the first department, the newest department in the City of Lancaster. And that was really, now we're saying that we are annually budgeting and committing to the work of democracy building for the City of Lancaster. So that was really the transformation related to investing and institutionalizing this work in the city. The first department over 3 decades, and merging the Office of Promotion. So we started to look at engagement across the board. So I'm going to talk to you about our programming, and then also talk to you briefly about what the structure looks like. So as an administration, we look at how are we engaging, and what are the points of contact, throughout our operations here at the city. So we knew that's happening at the customer service at reception, right? So now we oversee the city's customer service 311 system, and we're welcoming people through that process. We have a Bureau of Civic Engagement that's connecting with residents and really elevating engagement opportunities with residents through small grants like Love Your Block. We have a Neighborhood Leadership Academy. We're convening partners related to our welcoming standard that are doing inclusionary work in the city. And then we also are welcoming people into our city, and that's really part of tourism and promotions and special events. So how are we celebrating the cultural richnesses in our city? And so those are essentially, that's how our department has been established, from reception to the Bureau of Civic Engagement to the Bureau of Tourism and Promotion. And then we wanted to make sure that we were institutionalizing accessibility. So we created the Office of Language Services. So that is the structure, the organizational structure for our department. And through that, we have all of these really great menu of engagement tools. We have Go Vocal, which is a tool that all city departments are using. We have multiple language access tools that all departments are using. Public safety is like our #1 accessor to our language access tools. And so those are some of the things that we essentially establish. We try to decentralize the centralized system. So it's not only an engagement, we're making sure that our tools are utilized throughout all of the departments, and that they're all following a protocol and process to make sure that we're essentially developing really good engagement plans for the City of Lancaster.
Thank you so much for those details.
Is that me?
Your really hard work. So as I think Sarah explained, we are going, before we pivot to our next featured city, Bethlehem, we are actually going to offer
Laura, we are having some internet issues.
Offer their own.
Hmm?
Oh, can folks hear me? Can everyone hear?
Mm-hmm. There's a bit of
Okay.
lag.
Okay. Sorry about that. Is everyone with me now? Okay. So I'm going to turn it, before we turn it to talk about Bethlehem with Janine, I wanted to first ask Janine if she has any reflections based on what Milsey shared, any tips that she would like to share with this group today.
First, I just want to say Milsey is spot on. And I will say this before we talk about Bethlehem. We actually came to City of Lancaster when we were thinking of an engagement platform and learned about the work that they were doing. And so I just want to give kudos to Milsey and the whole department in leading that work. The one thing that I will say, and I don't know if it's a tip as much as it is a framework, I think when we're engaging internally, one of the things you said, Milsey, is at first you think engagement, you think external. And I think it's something for all of us to think about, is how we operate internally and how we create that internal buy-in. And so I think what's helpful for us is just letting our departments and our bureaus know that when we are using the platform, or when we're using that any form of external engagement in general, this is data that's going to help their work and provide like a proactive, I guess, a proactive framework to government rather than reactive, right? Because proactive kind of says, you know what, we're taking a data-centered approach here versus the reactive, oftentimes complaint-focused, right? The loudest voice in the room gets like 8 phone calls back, right? Or all that response. So it's like, how do you create more equitable response in government? So I appreciated Millsy talking about the internal dynamic and creating that buy-in through letting departments know, like, we are going to do a data-centered approach to this that will ultimately help you versus a complaint-focused model of response. So thanks, Millsy, for that.
Thank you, Janine. Chloe, any reflections or tips you'd like to share?
Yeah, thanks so much. And it's always great to be inspired by the City of Lancaster, as many of us have been. That's one reflection. But I will just say one thing in your question, Laura, about how do you convince someone important in government leadership that meaningful public engagement is worth time and money? I think, there's many reasons we can explain why it's important that we want to hear from people and why we need to hear from a variety of people. But one thing that I have sometimes found can convince someone who's like, let's just have one public meeting. Whoever comes, that's it, and we're done. That's enough. Of the reason to like do more meaningful public engagement, to get out in the community, to have the ability to have a back and forth, is sometimes it actually works to sort of help educate the public about some of the issues and inform them more about what government does. And my quick story about that is that sometimes we hear from people about, well, we really want our retail corridors, our restaurants and shops to be vibrant. We don't want stores closing, and we don't want to have vacancies in our community. But we also don't want any new housing development. We don't want new apartment buildings. We don't want people living near the retail corridors. And sometimes when we're out in the community or even online, people give these comments. I'm like, well, there's a connection there. If we have more people living right close to a retail corridor, it's more likely that the restaurants will survive because there'll be more patrons for them. And really, honestly, people don't think of that. So that sometimes there's stories like that you can have a little anecdote to convince someone that like more public engagement might even help with some help educate the public or inform them. So there's an angle you can take sometimes to convince someone.
Thanks so much for that, Chloe. Definitely think it's important to elevate that personal storytelling and use concrete examples of why this is important work. So thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to turn it back to Janine now from Bethlehem. And Janine, pivoting topics a little bit, I'm curious if you could share your thoughts and experiences on the role that transparency plays in building both internal and external trust, and how you've worked to maintain it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, first, I think it's important to contextualize the City of Bethlehem. So in terms of engagement and engagement opportunities, and I loved what Chloe said before, it's not enough to have like one public meeting or one opportunity to engage. And I mean, our demographics, we have around 78,000 people that live in Bethlehem now. 11% on the census identify as foreign-born. We have 30% that identify as Latina, Latino, Hispanic. We have 25% that speak a language other than English at home. And so the city, I don't know, I would say they don't have an engagement office, right? Even before we got here. My position is actually in the mayor's office as the director of equity and inclusion. And so really the task before us was, how do we engage our residents in a meaningful way? Also recognizing that in 2022, we were coming out of a pandemic, still almost at the tail end of a pandemic. So when we came on into the office in January of 2022, we were still wearing masks, right? And so people were kind of figuring out how to be with each other still. In terms of transparency, We were a new administration. People were figuring out who we were. They were used to a different leadership style with the previous mayor. And our very first project that we wanted to engage people on was our American Rescue Plan dollars. Every city has a certain amount of American Rescue Plan dollars that were given. Different cities had different processes for how they were planning to use them. They were given for infrastructure, broadband investment, a number of things. And we thought it was critical to talk to our community about how they envisioned the city being good stewards of those dollars. And so our first endeavor was coming on to, at that point, it was Citizen Lab and then Go Vocal, creating a project. And first, going onto the engagement platform, getting the word out about it, and then having the first project be about how our community would want to spend those American Rescue Plan dollars by using credits. So we had 22 different areas that ranged anywhere from, job training, rental assistance, public health, all these different, I would say, categories for equitable outcomes, right, that people wanted to see. And we did a number of different survey methods. Some were passive, like we had computers out at the public library and our Northampton Community College where people could go on and tell us how they wanted to see these dollars being spent. They had the paper surveys that were in every sewer bill, so we made sure all the property owners got them, our biannual newsletter, and then we had the engagement platform, which we were at the same time trying to teach people how to use since it was brand new. And we did a number of pop-up engagements for that. So that internal and external trust, coming back to that, was through this first project, was engaging all of our departments and bureaus, because all of those different equitable outcomes were coming through their departments, right? It would kind of determine how we're spending that money. And at the same time, we wanted to create this external trust, saying like, hey, we do value your opinion. We want to center your voices in our programs and policies. And how do we do that, particularly with this project? And out of that project, through Go Vocal, through the platform, we created something called the Community Recovery Fund. And now it is our third year doing it. And community-based organizations can apply. We created a very low barrier application for folks. And we are able to kind of measure those equitable outcomes now through our community partners. And it's not necessarily government doing something to a community, it's enabling our community partners to do something with the community based on what they identified as important priorities. And so the external trust part was just introducing people to a new way of engaging and providing multiple opportunities across several months. And the internal portion was really working alongside our other departments on those engagement opportunities and making sure that they saw their own work reflected in that engagement. And so that was a really interesting way to come on together in 2022. And since then, it has become, we're creating a culture of engagement from that. Even though we don't have our own department, now we're learning to tag each other in to be able to do the work.
Fascinating. Thank you. And congratulations on the success of that project. And actually that was a great segue into my next question, which sort of touches on how you were able to successfully communicate and engage community organizations and residents about this opportunity, even though you have, I think, a relatively small staff and no staff that is formally doing engagement work. So I'm curious if you have, if you could share a little bit more about how you navigated that and what specific strategies or tools helped bridge that gap.
I think the short answer to that question is we're still navigating it, right? And I think it's okay to say that because right now, when we first created the engagement platform and created different projects, the two admins, I would say, are myself and my colleague, Angie, and she's the director of Mayor's Initiatives. And between two of us, we talk to different departments that have different projects. So we have one on affordable housing, we have our climate action plan, there's a climate challenge people can take. So we split those projects in terms of actually putting up the engagement opportunities on the platform. But what we would like to do is start empowering our folks in different bureaus and departments. So while you might not have like an engagement person for each department or bureau, just tagging in the person that probably has the most forward-facing position and saying, hey, when you work with this consultant or when you're working on this project, like come to us and we will tell you how to be like a project manager on there. And so eventually shifting to more of like a collaborative model with all of our departments and bureaus at the table, and like really getting them immersed in this work and saying, hey, this is a tool that is not just a mayor's office tool or like engagement tool for consultants. This can be used for, and I believe maybe it was Montgomery County that used it for community health needs assessment, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily this big project. You know, how can you use it as a tool for just the things you do annually or biannually, right? And so that's part of the capacity building that I think we would like to work on in the future, versus just saying, oh, we're just a team of two, how can we tackle all of this? I think the more hands, the merrier. And as long as people feel empowered and comfortable using it, it will be a very valuable tool.
Great, thank you so much. I've always liked the expression "many hands make like light work," and I'm sure it's not light work, but the many hands part resonates. So in light of your actual job title, I'm wanting to pivot a bit to discuss how you have gone about trying to ensure that engagement efforts are equitable and inclusive, particularly for communities that have historically been underrepresented in Bethlehem. And then, you know, I know we're at a time of transition, certainly at the federal level. If you're able to share your thinking on whether work has shifted at all in light of that, or if there's any way in which you all are pivoting or just thinking about this moment.
I think I'll start by saying we remain faithful to the work that's in front of us, right? We are not going to pivot. I think all of our work in one sense or another has to have measurable, equitable outcomes. And so it's not just like, oh, Janine, the director of equity and inclusion will solve all these problems. It's how do all of our departments approach this work in an equitable fashion? Now, whether or not you use those words as they are, at least in the American context right now, they are trigger words. I think it is the goal of good city government to be doing this work in an equitable fashion. And so in some cases that might look like changing language. I'll give an example. We had a map that we did through Esri that we wanted to put on We Build Bethlehem for a certain project. And it used to be our equity indicator map. Now it's called the neighborhood outcomes map. So there's little things that we've had to pivot on. However, the work remains the same. And in fact, I would argue that I think it's more important than ever that, you know, our departments that have their own language access plans, like I want people to feel comfortable utilizing them, right? Like get trained in Propio and language line and using those tools, right? And it's not just translating to Spanish, right? There are a number of different languages that are spoken in Bethlehem. And so getting people used to using the resources when we use the platform, I know there's an auto translation feature that's now there. So getting people just feeling empowered to do the work well and not to shy away from it, even in light of everything going on. But in general, I mean, we always have a number of different engagement efforts. So the platform is just one method that we use. We also have a Latino Advisory Council. We have Community Advisory Board. We have a Southside Task Force, Human Relations Commission. So there's a number of opportunities where we are meeting with folks that maybe have not always felt that connection to government and having those engagement opportunities. So we remain very intentional in that. And in fact, probably more so now than we were before.
Thank you so much, Janine. Okay, we are now going to pivot to Chloe to see if she wants to share a tip or a reflection based on Janine's thoughtful comments.
Yeah, thanks. And it's great to hear, Janine, your commitment and the City of Bethlehem's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and meaningful engagement, and some of the other things that you're doing to meet that. And I would say that just working for Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, right at this moment, our elected officials have also kind of doubled down on the commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the county and to serving our more vulnerable residents in different ways. And it's great to be a part of that right at this time, where we can say, no, this government is still here for you, and we do want to hear from you. We have, like Janine and Milsey, a diverse population. 16% of the county residents speak a language other than English at home. So, and it's a wide diversity of languages. I'm sure, I know Janine and Milsey are familiar with. So, and population growth in Montgomery County has been steady, but it's been mostly through immigration. So just migration and immigration, not through like an increase in birth rate. So we have people moving here from various places. We have a lot of different languages. We have our lower income population just remaining committed to listening to everyone in the county, and keeping that in the front of our minds is a great, that's an important thing.
Thanks, Chloe, and looking forward to hearing more about Montgomery County very soon. But first, I'll turn it back to Milsey to see if you'd like to share a thought or a tip based on Janine's comments.
Just want to say, Janine, really appreciate how you articulated, that your response and your questions. We love Bethlehem, very similar to the city of Lancaster. Leadership's great there. Staff is really great. And one of the things that I just want to highlight, not sure of all the people that are on the call, but wherever you are in your engagement processes, one of the things that Janine really highlighted is that there's a small and mighty team. And what I really appreciated, that defining that one thing that's going to work across the city. And for her, was the engagement platform, right? Bethlehem, we build Bethlehem. And so, and other tools, right? Yeah, it's not only the digital, but it's also those traditional tools of convening and working with people. And I think that the one thing just for folks to take away from is, no matter where you are in the process of engagement, understanding the resources that you have at that moment and working with those resources is really important, so that you can continue to build on that work. And I have so much more to say on that, but I know that we're limited with time. Thank you, Janine, for sharing.
Thank you so much, Milsey, and hopefully we'll have more time to dive into that a bit. But yes, I'm gonna now, with pleasure, turn it over to Chloe from Montgomery County. And Milsey was just touching on sort of traditional engagement tools and digital tools such as the Go Vocal platform. Could you share from your work experience how you find the right balance between those tools to try to reach as many residents as possible?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So we have a number of things up on our Engage Monco site, but the primary project I've been working on is a comprehensive plan for Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Montgomery County has over 850,000 residents, and it's a very large geographic area. So one of the challenges facing us as we wanted to get public input related to a new comprehensive plan for the county is trying to hear from different people in different places, trying to engage with different segments of the population, and also just getting people to be interested at all in the question of Montgomery County's comprehensive plan, to be quite frank. It's just like a lot of people feel much more connected with what's going on in their immediate neighborhood and community. And so thinking countywide, they wouldn't necessarily be that engaged. So we decided on a mix of engagement strategies, and also came up pretty early on in the process with kind of key questions that we wanted to ask. And I think that when you talk about, well, in your community, should we do more to support bicycles and pedestrians, and what would that look like for you, right? Asking them a question that they're interested in, not focusing on, well, what's the future of the entire county? But to actually answer your question. So we decided on a mix of strategies. We started with a SurveyMonkey survey when we kicked this process off in 2022. And then we've done a number of presentations to community groups, like to municipal meetings in local municipalities, but also to groups like the Rotary. We have several active branches of the NAACP. We've been there to their meetings to present. We've been to other kind of community groups and organizations. We've been to a couple of places of worship that have been like, what are you doing? Come tell us. Okay, we'll come talk to you about it. So we give a little presentation, we have Q&A, get people's input. And then we did a lot of pop-up events at community festivals and fairs last summer, which is honestly a lot of fun. Interactive, get out there with some posters, talk to people, and what are you doing? What's this all about? And then, well, you get to give input on the future of your community and really talk one-on-one with people. And then we established this Engage Monco platform where people could give input on topics they were interested in. And they can choose all the topics if they want and provide their input, provide their thoughts on the future. So we then moved into stakeholder interviews and focus groups sort of late in the year last year. We reached out to community leaders in various community groups and organizations. In particular, if there were populations we thought we hadn't heard from as much, tried to talk to them about what are they seeing, what are they hearing, what do their people need? Like, for example, the director of a food bank, the leader of a Korean church, the other community organizations, like, well, what are your folks needing? What are you hearing? What are kind of the issues going on there? And then we did do a couple of focus groups where we got people engaged in person and sit down and talk to us about their needs and concerns. And those were selected from certain locations. So we had a focus group of family members of people with intellectual disabilities, for example, because we had not sure we were hearing from the disability community, or so we tried to reach out to there's an organization that's very sort of organized and set up to be able to do something like that. So we were able to connect in with them. Anyway, so we really tried to do a mix of things and have tried to circle back on the Engage Monco platform with, like, what are we doing now? What did we hear from you? And it's a lot of work to follow up with that, but I have heard in past planning processes I've been involved in that people, if they take a survey, they want to know where that goes. They want to know it's not going into a black hole. Like, did anyone read it? Does anyone care what I think? Why did I take the time to do this? So I think having the ability, having a site that's really set up to, like, follow back with that and say, we heard from you, here's what you said, here's what we're doing next, has been really helpful and valuable.
Thank you so much, Chloe. And you sort of touched on this a little bit in terms of the mix between digital and in-person engagement work. Have there been, I'm moving the order a little bit, by the way.
Whatever you like.
Have there been certain tactics that you've used to ensure that the digital engagement work doesn't exclude residents who, for example, might not have reliable internet, like me? I'm just kidding. Or may have language barriers, that sort of thing. And could you identify what has been most effective there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we've tried, and honestly, it hasn't been that effective, but we do still find it important. We've put paper copies of surveys and, like, cards that advertise or that promote the opportunities for engagement in the public libraries. I love libraries. They're fantastic. And they do, all kinds of people use libraries, but certainly people who don't have reliable internet at home often use the library for that purpose, or who may be needing other services or support. We haven't actually got a lot of response to that, but I'm glad that we're doing it and still providing that as an option. And I think the community, reaching out to community leaders is also really helpful, trying to find a community group or organization within, so we talked to a leader in the Hispanic community in Pottstown, right? So, like, would reach out specifically to someone saying, we want to hear from you about what's going on in your community, what you think, what you need. So trying to proactively reach out there and find people who either aren't using the internet, have a language barrier, or are just otherwise not really engaged with the work that we're doing, and hope to hear, like, what's important to you, what's important to them. We do also try to translate things, like paper, things that we have, and we have several staff members in our office that speak Spanish well. And so if we're doing a pop-up event in an area where we know there are Spanish speakers, we try to make sure that we have staff that can be responsive to that language need as much as possible. I mean, I wish we could do that more and with more languages, but that is the most widely spoken language after English. So it's great that we at least can serve Spanish speakers with our staff.
Great, thank you. And pivoting back to the digital engagement tools, curious if you could share sort of what specifically has been most successful, and if there's a particular platform that you've used that's been especially effective in your view. And you know, I heard what you said about the follow-up piece. Have these tools been helpful in ensuring that follow-up actually happens, which I know a lot of people tend to be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, we use the Go Local platform to host our Engage Monco site. That's worked out well. I think that within that, surprisingly popular was this sort of, it was almost like a test project that we put up called Map Your Ideas for Monco, where people could just click on a map and say whatever they wanted to. People really liked that. Just like, tell us a thing, like here, right here, we need a sidewalk, or here, there's no shade at this bus stop, or whatever, you know, all kinds of things. So that was just, it's nice to have something that's fairly open-ended on there. And then, of course, with specific projects, we have been able to circle back and provide, you know, follow-up. Like I just posted yesterday, the community, I think Janine already mentioned, we had our health department did a community health needs assessment. They just published a fancy story map with the results of that. And so I just posted that on there so people can see. They had a very successful survey that they did through SurveyMonkey, although it was posted on Engage Monco. Like the health department is doing the survey, click here to link. So it was there, although the survey itself was hosted through SurveyMonkey, but now people can come back and see the actual report that came out of that. So I really think that's valuable. I think it builds trust with government, to tell, whether it's on an online platform or however you can do it. I mean, in public meetings, to circle back and say, we heard you, here's what you said, here's what our next steps are. It's just so valuable to do that however you can do it.
Great, thank you so much, Chloe, and congratulations on the great work it sounds like is happening in Montgomery County.
Thank you.
850,000 is no small number, so thank you again. Okay, to ensure that we have at least a little bit of time for some Q&A, I want to just turn back to Milsey first, following our format, to see, Milsey, if you want to share a reflection or tip based on Chloe's remarks.
Absolutely. Chloe, we had the pleasure of a few weeks ago being all together here at the City of Lancaster, meeting in person. Really thankful for your understanding of inclusion and making sure that you're documenting and recording people's voices in Montgomery County, and also understand your staffing challenges. So this is like the Planning Commission moving the work forward. And so just want to say thank you for the work that you continue to do. I will say I love Chloe's approach and the approach of the Planning Commission of, it is so important when we're talking about engagement that we're meeting folks. I mean, the basic understanding of engagement is that you're meeting folks and communicating with them at their needs and level. And so digital communication is great on making sure that there is a centralized place. It is documented for a very long time where people can go back and reflect and understand the timelines and things that have passed and related to digital engagement. But also it is so important with an aging population that we have and an immigrant population that we have here, that it's followed up with traditional engagement. And that could mean canvassing, that can mean attending organizations that are supporting different demographics that are here, and making sure that we have surveying tools. And essentially we actually print out our survey from Go Vocal and fill those things out, and then we're able to upload the information. So this is where it is so important as you're developing your engagement plan, as Montgomery County did, that there is this traditional engagement process as well as a digital engagement process, and that it should be standard with anyone that's actually working on engagement initiatives. And then there's a third level, is how you're communicating that out. How are you documenting, communicating all of those efforts out and the messaging around that? So I appreciate Chloe's approach for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Milsey, for that very thoughtful distillation. Janine, any thoughts you'd like to share as a reflection on this discussion?
I just want to say, Chloe mentioned something really important about closing the feedback loop. I think there's so many times where people experience survey fatigue, and they're just like, oh gosh, not another survey. And not only not another survey, but I'm going to take the survey and then I'm never going to find out if it actually made a difference, right? So part of what the platform does, I think, is a way of communicating this ongoing story of the city and why it chooses to do what it does. And if it comes out with a program or a policy, I think people can see their voices centered, hopefully, in that decision making. And so just wanted to acknowledge that is another reason why we kind of need to make this make a culture of engagement, because I think that's what contributes to trust in government, right? Is if people feel like their voices were actually heard and recognized. It's much different if there's a reason why something can't happen because of a legality or some kind of legislation. But even communicating that, right, is like, we heard you, here's what we can do, here's where we're limited, but we hope that you see how your engagement shaped this particular initiative or endeavor. So I just really appreciate Chloe mentioning the closing of the feedback loop, because that is how we essentially gain trust over and over again, and how we leave things better than we found it for the administrations that come after us, right? Because we will not be in these seats forever, right? So how do we hand off a good process to the folks that come after us as well?
Indeed. Thank you so much, Janine. And I'm just blown away by all of you and your commitment to this work. And so I'm because we're short on time, and because your words just are, I think, speak for themselves. I'm not going to spend too much time distilling what I heard, but this data-driven, impact-driven work is in my view more important than ever at the local level. And so grateful to all of you for helping to make it a priority in your communities. I before we pivot to the Q&A, I did just want to make one exciting announcement, which is, oh, here we go. Today, Local Policy Lab, in partnership with the City of Lancaster, is publishing a case study that actually goes through in more detail than Milsey was able to share today, how Lancaster institutionalized neighborhood engagement by creating the department that Milsey leads. And so I'm going to drop the link to the case study in the chat shortly. But would love people's feedback on it if you have any. And of course, we are trying to get it into the hands of as many interested folks as possible. So feel free to circulate. And we Local Policy Lab will be hosting Milsey for a special conversation specifically about this at the end of April 30th. So stay tuned for information on that. And I just want to thank her, Mayor Sirachi, and her entire team. Josh Beltray, I see is here, and Bryant Hang, and my wonderful colleagues at Local Policy Lab. Abima Chavez Hernandez was the primary drafter of this case study, and Christine Lopes Metcalf was instrumental as well. So want to thank both of them. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Sarah, and just thank you again so much to our amazing panelists.
Thank you so much, Laura, and I'll definitely be at that upcoming webinar and really looking forward to diving into this case study myself. All right, so we have just about 7 minutes and we have some really great questions here in the chat. Some of the ones that are a little bit Lancaster specific, I think some of those will be answered in the case study, and Milsey's team is on top of it and responding. So there's one that I'll open up to all panelists around: how do you balance lowering the barrier to participation while also having clean data, demographic data to support effective decision making? Specifically, are we collecting demographic information? Are we requiring registration? Things like that. Janine.
this was the very first question we had actually with our first project, because we wanted to recognize, and I think ultimately it depends on the project, right? Because with the American Rescue Plan project, we wanted to make sure that we could actually see demographically who we were hearing from and who we weren't hearing from. So collecting that initially through the registration on the platform was important to us. When we did the paper surveys, I mean, people obviously could opt out if they wanted to, like they could return a survey and it might not have that data on it. So for that particular project, it was important for us. However, for the other projects, we would rather just have the data that's in the survey itself versus the actual registration on the platform, which I think that was one question I saw in the chat. So now we no longer require that registration to use the platform. People can engage without having to answer all those questions because we found that it was a barrier. And oftentimes when people are being surveyed, especially at pop-up events, they're not there just to take your survey. They're there to participate in a larger event. So I think you have to decide at the end of the day what data is really important to you, and then figure out project by project how do you make it low barrier engagement but still collect what you need for the project.
Really well said. For this, oh, go ahead, go ahead,
Oh,
Chloe.
I'll just add that this is a real challenge, I think, in terms of some of my colleagues here and other folks are looking for like exactly how many people did you talk to? What exactly is the demographic breakdown of every single person? And because we did so many different things, including pop-ups, where we're not asking people what race they identify with, how old they are, what their household income is, we're just talking to whoever comes by. And we do try to go to a variety of events, but we don't even, it's even really hard to try to make tick marks to keep track of how many people we talk to, but even that is really difficult when you're engaging with folks. So I think we have to just we do better trying to talk to more people and do more things and have to try to get comfortable with like a little less precision in the data about who we talk to. So.
I will also add to that, Sarah. Thank you, Chloe. I agree with you and both Janine. I will reference it totally does depend on the project. So if there are requirements related to engagement of that data, we will set up, registration information that's collecting that information. But also if you're really thinking about it and just building intentionality into like the surveying, you can also suss out some of those questions so that people are registering and responding to your survey, but you can build some of those questions into the survey in a different way. Second level, what we also look at if we're looking for low barrier responses, we may ask just 2 questions. What quadrant do you live in? Or what block or what area? So it's a little bit less specific, but since we have census tract information, our city's 7 square miles, so we can essentially by percentage say that we, if our responses were 1,700 of them were put around 1 or 2 census tracts, we will say we have a high percentage or response rate from Black and Brown communities, elderly communities. We understand by census tract what those demographics are. So there's different ways that you can analyze that.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question and maybe we can give rapid fire 1-minute answers. I loved this one from Angel. Can you share a quick example of where community engagement directly led to influencing policy in your city? And we'll start with Millsy.
Comprehensive plan. So Chloe's on her comprehensive plan. You can go to engagelancaster.com and see all of the feedback. But the responses that we received from residents directly impacted our comprehensive plan, which is a really important document in our city.
Good. Chloe, what about you?
Sure, I'll share a story from a past project, which is we started doing public engagement for the borough of Half Borough's comprehensive planning support, just that small borough. And immediately we heard from people about a stretch of road that opens up from 1 travel lane in each direction to 2 travel lanes in each direction. And that point at which the speed limit doesn't change, but everyone steps on the gas when they go from 1 lane to 2 lanes. And we just started hearing just from everyone we talked to was like, that's so unsafe. We hate it. They're just, driving too fast through our communities. And I reached out to PennDOT, who owns the road, and it's like, we're getting a million complaints about this. Any chance you want to do anything about it? And they're like, sure, we can just continue the same cross section further north. We're going to repave that in 6 months. We'll just repaint the line. So it'll be 1 travel lane in each direction with a center turn lane. And it was before we even finished the comprehensive plan that was implemented. And so just being out there talking to people and seeing the vast number of people that were complaining about the same thing and then reaching out. Like, in my position, I have a connection. I can reach out and ask about that. And like, they just did it. So it doesn't always happen quite like that, but sometimes, there's a really good result that can come really quickly.
Wonderful. Janine, anything to add?
Just real quick, I think the most recent decision, I should say, was our Southside Community Center feasibility study. We had worked with consultants, a lot of pop-up interaction, and during that interaction, folks were able to say like which sites on the south side of Bethlehem were preferable to having community center and which ones were not. And so, with the help of consultants and city staff, we were able to show in a plan exactly what people had told us that they wanted to see and what they didn't want to see. And there's some historic hurt there on the south side as well with previous things that did not work out. But at the end of the plan, I think people were able to see that it was down between two sites. And I'll understand that the one site that we're looking at right now, I think there is like a communal consensus that we feel really good about. And so hopefully in the next 10 years, we'll be able to see that come to fruition because of the engagement that took place. So it's very exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We'll go ahead and end there for today. I just want to thank everyone who's still with us for joining, and especially to our panelists and our moderator. That was a wonderful discussion. We also tracked down all these questions that you submitted in chat and through the Q&A. We'll follow up with the panelists and get some answers to you in our follow-up emails as well. So thank you all and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.